So this may be controversial and most people may disagree with me, but if your goal is just building muscle, lower reps, I'm talking between 4 and 8, are basically a cheat code. And not because high reps necessarily don't work or because you get a magical stimulus from doing the lower reps, but because lower reps literally make it easier to train harder. And we know that training hard is what drives muscle growth. And most people don't realize this. So in this video, I'm going to explain exactly why lower reps give you an unfair advantage for hypertrophy and why most people are unintentionally holding themselves back by living in higher rep ranges. So let me tell you what I used to do. I used to think that higher reps meant better muscle growth because they were more painful. If you've ever done a set of, say, 15 or higher, then you know the feeling. It's burning, the muscle's pumped full of blood, and you're out of breath and sweating bullets by the end of the set. And I would chase that feeling, sets of 12, 15, sometimes even 20 or higher. And by the end of the set, my muscles were on fire and it felt extremely challenging, which led me to think that it was a very productive set. But here's what I eventually realized. That burning sensation was often stopping me before the muscle was actually done. So there's a big difference between a set being painful and a set reaching muscular failure, aka being actually effective for muscle growth. So just because it hurts doesn't mean it's effective. And once I made that distinction, that's when I started to rethink everything. When you're doing higher reps, especially 12 and above, fatigue builds gradually. Lactic acid accumulates, the muscle starts burning, your breathing becomes more intense because you're taxing your cardiovascular system, and then your focus ends up shifting from producing force to just surviving the set, basically. You're not really focused on getting the maximum amount of stimulus by the end of the set. You're just focusing on getting through those last few reps, which is exactly when that burn starts to kick in. And when it does, two things happen. One, it becomes extremely uncomfortable, as we all know. And two, this is the big one, it becomes harder to tell whether you actually reached muscular failure or you just quit the set prematurely because it hurt too much. So if you haven't mastered the skill of pushing yourself through that immense pain, which most people probably haven't, then you'll end up racking the weight just when the pain starts to get a little bit intense, not when the muscle is actually incapable of producing another rep. So what you end up with is a lot of uncomfortable sets, but not enough truly high effort ones. And we know that muscle growth is driven by mechanical tension under high effort, not just discomfort and burning sensation. Now let's talk about lower reps, 4 to 8 being my favorite range. The biggest advantage of using this rep range and potentially going up to even higher reps like 10, but I'd reserve that for mostly isolation lifts. On big compounds, I don't like to go above 8. And the reason is because the overwhelming burn from that lactic acid buildup becomes almost non-existent. This is what I meant when I said lower reps literally make it easier to train hard, because you're no longer fighting the fatigue and just trying to survive the set, which means you can focus purely on producing force. Because instead of 5 or 6 reps gradually slowing down at the end of the set before you reach muscular failure, the slowdown becomes much more sudden in lower rep ranges. You'll be doing clean reps with great technique, and then all of a sudden the bar speed will just significantly drop. And you'll instantly know in that moment that you only have 1 or 2 reps left. It's very obvious. And so, even if you just stop the set right there and you didn't continue pushing to failure, you're still within an effective intensity range to stimulate growth. And decreasing that margin for error, which we could call the difference between how many reps you have left when the bar speed starts to slow or when it becomes painful, can make the difference long term, which is especially important for a beginner who isn't yet able to push their sets very hard. With higher reps, that slowdown in bar speed isn't so obvious. It starts to slow a little bit and then a little bit more. It's a much more gradual process. It doesn't just happen like in the lower rep ranges. So if you're doing a set of 15, maybe on rep 10, it starts to slow a little, and then a little bit more on rep 11, and then a little bit more on rep 12. And then rep 13 feels heavy, but maybe you could have still done 3 or 4 more, you don't know. It's much more difficult to judge. And that ability to gauge proximity to failure more accurately is going to increase the consistency of actual effective training sessions. which is what you need to get results fast and efficiently, which is exactly what we're looking for to make consistent progress in an efficient manner. Now, there's also a practical benefit to doing lower rep sets that often gets overlooked, which is time efficiency. A set of 4 to 8 takes about half the time that a set of 12 or higher does. And although that may not be a lot on a set per set basis, because it may just be 30 seconds versus a minute that the set takes, but over the course of the entire session, it can save you some valuable time, especially if you're someone who doesn't have a lot of it. So in addition to all of the other benefits that you get with doing low reps, it just becomes a no-brainer. You end up with sessions that are more efficient, less draining, and easier to recover from. Now, this next one is huge and often gets overlooked. When you're deep into a high rep set and that lactic acid is flooding the muscle, your technique will almost always start to break down towards those last few reps. Because as you get more fatigued and the set becomes more painful, your body is naturally going to fight against you because it wants to stop the pain. And the way that usually shows up is in your technique suffering. And even more importantly than that, that technique breakdown is going to happen toward the end of the set because that's when it's most painful. But that's also when the most important part of the set is. Those last few reps are the most important for muscle growth. That is where mechanical tension is the highest. So if your technique is breaking down at the most crucial moment, you lose tension on the target muscle exactly when it matters most. Lower reps reduce that risk because you're not accumulating as much fatigue. You can maintain tighter, more controlled technique throughout the set. And especially during those final reps where it counts the most. That's what makes the stimulus. Now, before I end the video, I just want to be clear that you can absolutely still grow with higher reps above 12 and even 15. You know, muscle hypertrophy is a very forgiving stimulus and it can occur across a wide range of rep ranges. All I'm saying is that if your goal is to maximize your progress as efficiently as possible, while also making it easier to train hard consistently, lower reps, especially on the big compound lifts, provides more advantages. Now, of course, there are a few isolation exercises where slightly higher reps make sense. You know, movements where stability is limited or where heavier loads can cause other muscle groups to take over. For example, I usually do higher reps on rear delt flies or lateral raises. And yeah, in those specific cases, going a bit higher can help keep tension on the target muscle, but those are the exception. For the majority of the lifts, especially compounds, I only use the 4 to 8 rep range or maybe 5 to 8 rep range, but never above 8. And it's incredibly powerful and I've made incredible results doing so. So if you haven't given these lower rep ranges a try yet because maybe someone said that they build less muscle or that they're for strength and not muscle, or even that you might get injured going that low, which isn't true because your technique is going to be better, like I already discussed, then I'd highly recommend giving it a try because I'm sure that once you have, you won't go back. So with that said, I appreciate you guys watching the video and I'll catch you in the next one.